what do you guys do when you get scared? Sometimes kids, when they get scared, they run and hide, right?
Yes.
Or sometimes when we get scared, we cry. Yes? Well, Mary Slessor, when she got scared, she would weave. And that way, nobody could see her hands shaking because she was scared. She would weave. And that's what she would do when she was scared. Well, Mary Slessor was back in Scotland because she was sick. And she brought with her her first adopted daughter, Janie. And she might have looked a little different. Even though she was born in Scotland, she still looked a little different because her skin was darker because she'd been under the African sun, whereas people in Scotland had very white skin. And her hair was short because of the hot sun. And in Scotland, all the ladies had long, beautiful hair and fancy hairstyles. And her dress was very simple, whereas the ladies in Scotland had all fancy dresses. And it was very hard for Mary to be in Scotland, but she knew, even though she wasn't in Calabar, where she loved to be, she knew that God had a plan for her in Scotland while she was there in Scotland. And she had to rest a little bit because she'd been sick. But while she was there in Scotland, one of her main jobs was to go to different churches and tell people in the church about the work that God was doing in Calabar. And she would tell them about Calabar and the people learning about Jesus in Calabar, and she would encourage the people to give money, and she would encourage the people in Scotland to go to Calabar and tell people about Jesus and how important it is for all of us to go and tell people about Jesus. But after she had a good rest for some time, then she got on the boat and she traveled back to Calabar. And it took her like 5 weeks on the boat to get back to Calabar again. It was a very long journey. But when she got back to Calabar, she was staying with the OK Young people. Can you say that with me? OK Young people. Yes, very good. Yes, those were the people that she was with, the OK Young people. And God had started changing their hearts. They weren't as violent anymore. They didn't kill each other as much. But there still was not as much change as the British government wanted. The British government had heard that people had changed, but not enough. And so the British government had sent an important soldier named Sir Claudia MacDonald. How about we salute like a soldier? Salute like a soldier? Very good. That's Sir Claudia MacDonald. He was there and he came and talked with Mary about the OK Young people. The British Army was planning on sending soldiers to the OK Young people. We still hear rumors of wars and killing, and this killing needs to stop. And if they're not going to stop, then I have orders to send a soldier to be in charge of the OK Young people. Oh, well, Mary Slessor, she was very sad because if they sent soldiers to be in charge of the OK Young people, the men would get angry again and they would start fighting and they might kill the soldiers, right? And so Mary said, no, don't send soldiers, don't send soldiers. You have to send just the right person to be in charge of the OK Young people. Well, all of a sudden, a huge smile came across Sir Walter's face, and he said, you know what, Mary? We are going to send you to be in charge of the OK Young people. This was great news because Mary already knew the people, and she knew how to talk to them and how to show them God's love. And Mary would be the official representative for the British government. So she would get paid to be there and tell people about Jesus. And so she was very happy about that. You see, Mary was very respected amongst the people. And they knew that Mary could make good decisions. If there was an argument that needed to be settled or a war that needed to stop, they would send in Mary. And Mary would come with her weaving bag, and she would come amongst the village chiefs. The chiefs would all be sitting down. And Mary would walk up to the chiefs, and she would sit down with all the chiefs. And she would get out her weaving because she would be so scared her hands would be shaking. But she would just pray and ask God for wisdom. And she would listen to the chiefs and listen to their arguments and their problems. and she would help stop the wars from breaking out.
Wow.
And God would use her and work through her, right? Should we pretend like we're weaving? Do you guys weave? What do you weave? Bracelets? Do you make bracelets sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah? So we pretend like we got bracelets and we're going to make bracelets. Can you do that? Yeah. Very good. Good job. So Mary would sit there with the chiefs and she would listen, and sometimes she would make funny jokes in order to keep them laughing and talking, but she would keep praying and God would help provide a way and help her to solve many difficult problems and stop many wars. Sometimes Mary would sit as a judge at her house, and she would have a rocking chair, and she would put a shawl over her head, a blanket over her head. She might have a baby that she was rocking and taking care of. And people from the village would come with their problems and tell them to Mary. And other people from the village would come and listen and see what was Mary going to say, what advice, what decision would she make, right? And they would listen, and Mary would listen to their stories and see what they were going to say. And then God would help her to know what is true and what is right, to make wise decisions, not to show favorites, but to do what is right and what is true. And she made a lot of very important decisions and helped lots of people make decisions. Well, Mary worked with the OK Young people for almost 15 years. She lived there with them. She prayed with them. She took care of them. She showed them God's love for them. And her and some other people helped build churches and schools, and they taught people about how to make things and then how to sell them and how to trade with other tribes, and not fight, but trade with other tribes in order to buy and sell goods. Mary was the vice counselor of the British Army. If somebody had an accusation to make, or they were afraid they were going to get hurt because of something they did, they would go see Mary, and Mary would help take care of them and help make the right decision for them. Because the people who lived in Akenji were trading and making lots of things and selling things with other tribes, they decided to move the village down closer to the river so that it would be easier to move up and down the river to meet with the other tribes and sell things and trade things with them. And so they moved down closer to the river. But Chief Edom, he chose not to go down by the river. He wanted to stay in the other village. And then all of a sudden, I got ahead of myself. All of a sudden, the smallpox disease broke out. And many, many people died. Mary had to run back and forth from the village down by the river, back up to the other village, back to this village, and bring medicine to all of them to try and help with the smallpox disease. Even Chief Edom got sick with the smallpox disease, and there were very few people to help take care of him. So Mary had to stay and help take care of Chief Edom. And eventually Chief Edom died, and Mary had to bury him all by herself. It was a very, very sad time for her. And she was very exhausted, and she became sick too. And it was very hard work. So she had to travel back to Scotland again and rest and get some medicine and rest for a little while. And so she took Janie and 3 of her children with her, and they went back to Scotland for a rest for a little while. And then, after they rested and they all got healthy, they came back to Calabar one more time, and they found out that a whole bunch of the missionaries that had been there had gotten sick too from the smallpox disease, and a bunch of the missionaries had died. But Mary had heard about another tribe that didn't know anything about Jesus. They were the Aros tribe. Do you want to say that one with me? Aros tribe. Very good. Good job. And they were a very, very fierce tribe. Very fierce tribe. They would attack and kill hundreds of people. And Mary was not able to go because they were so fierce. But she prayed and asked God, please make a way for me to go and tell the tribe about Jesus. Now, do you think Mary's going to be able to go, or do you think she's going to have to stay with the Akenji? What do you think?
Uh-huh.
She will go, yes.